you should start planning for your transition out of the military the day you sign up for the military. I know it's like, wait, I can't think that far ahead, and that's okay. So whether you are just doing a one-term enlistment or whether you're an officer going in just for your 4 or 6 year period, you need to be thinking right away, where am I going to be at the end of my first enlistment? Do I potentially want to stay for a second enlistment or continue if you're an officer, continue the education and stay with the military? It's important to think longer term. And I know that's difficult because even making the choice to join the military, which was in many cases a difficult one, I want you to lift your eyes up and think about where you're going to be longer term. So it's never too early to start thinking about your transition. A minimum is 1 year from the time you think, I'm not going to stay, I'm going to go ahead and get out. Or, I'm coming up for retirement. Whether you're enlisted or officer or warrant, it's time for me to transition. So about 1 year out is when you should start thinking seriously. And then at 6 months, you need to be in high gear. Now, don't worry. If you are already within 6 months of transitioning or you're already transitioned out of the military, no worries. We're going to help you to walk through the steps that you need to do, whether you are still in or you just got out. I've got a little list here, so please bear with me as I read a few of these off. The first thing you got to really think about is, where do I want to live? And if you're married or have children, it gets a little more complicated as well. So you want to think such a basic thing. Do I want to return home? Do I want to go to my spouse's home? Where do you want to go? Or do you want to stay right there in the immediate area of where you got out of the military? It's critically important that you decide, where do I want to go? And sometimes, by the way, it's also a decision about where you don't want to go. If you want to live in the country, that's awesome. You might say, I don't want to live in a city, because this is going to be the foundation for where you actually start your job search. So if you don't get that right, it gets more complicated from there. The second one, and this is very, very important. When you transition from the military, you're going to get a DD-214, a DD-214. This is a summary of your military service. It is absolutely critical that this is accurate in terms of how much time you have served on the military, your key military awards, and your training. And this is the foundation for everything you're going to do relative to the VA, for VA loans, for education benefits, for medical benefits, and so on. So you want to make sure that that is filled out and complete and ready. Don't allow the administration guys just to hand it to you and say, see ya. Take your time, make sure it's right. You can fix it after you leave the military. It's way easier to fix it while you're still in the military. So that's the second thing you must absolutely do. The third one. Now this is very important, especially for all of you that are in your 20s. You think, hey, I'm Superman, Superwoman, I don't need to worry about medical. Because I don't need medical, I'm in good shape. Well, the reality is, for every one of you as an EOD tech, the equipment that you wore, the things you did, let alone if you were in a combat situation, the way that you're leaving the military is not the way that you came into the military. And this is very, very important. We're talking physically and mentally, by the way. You need to get all the medical issues that you might have. If you have a sprained knee or a torn meniscus or something in your knee, you've got to get that addressed and documented while you're still in the military. If you had a traumatic brain injury, it's got to be documented. If you had a broken bone or something during the conduct of training or of an exercise or during operations, that's got to be documented. All of these things have got to be in your record. And that means what you have to do is make sure that you get your medical physical done before you leave the military. And this is very important, foot stomp, your Veterans Administration medical exam as well. So you have two, not one, but two. You have to get your end of tour medical from the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, and you have to get your VA physical as well. This is going to line you up for potential benefits later in life. Next one, you've got to absolutely make sure to enroll in the Transition Assistance Program, the TAP. No matter what service you are, no matter what rank you are, the military provides you training. It varies, of course, according to the base or the post, to help you to put together your resume, help you to think about where you would like to work and what you'd like to do. Please make sure to sign up for that. Now, sometimes they don't like to let you know this, but you can actually sign up for multiple courses. So if you sign up a year in advance and you take it, and then you might say, well, I'd like to get a refresher. I'd like to sign up again in 6 months. You are allowed to do that. It's completely okay, and I encourage you, please do this. Great question, great question. And remember again, for all of you who have gotten out of the military in your 20s and you had the luck in many cases to not be injured, you say, I don't need to do this. I don't even need to go through that process. I'm good to go. Well, it turns out I felt the same way. And quite frankly, you are not alone. Every military person feels that way, that if I was not wounded in combat or severely wounded during a training event, then you know what? I'm good to go. I was an infantry officer. I did not know that all of those many, tens of thousands of miles during my entire military career that I had run or walked, because I was a long distance runner as well, I didn't realize the impact that that would have on my back, for example. And in fact, it wasn't until the very end of my career that I discovered that I had compressed vertebrae because of the parachute jumps, because of all the running, because of all of the heavy packs that I had, obviously as a more junior officer, of course. And I didn't realize any of this. So it's important that you understand that the laws of our country support our veterans to not only when you are in the military, but when you leave the military. So even though you may not be combat wounded, and I was not ever combat wounded, however, the fair wear and tear on my body absolutely was there in ways that I never knew when I was in my 20s or 30s. And now that I'm obviously much older, I can see the impact of all that physical activity and work that I had done that was not typical that you would find in the civilian marketplace, in jobs. This is entitled to you by law. The important thing is you go through the process and have the VA doctors assess you so that you do understand where you are, and that if anything was to pop up later in life, that you have physical evidence thereof. It's very, very important that you put this stuff on the table, meaning too many times in the military, we don't really express our emotions, we keep them inside of us, and that can be great in combat situations. You always want to be calm, cool, and collected. Well, that ability to contain the emotions serves us well in stressful situations. It can be actually a detriment whenever you're dealing, if you have a significant other, a spouse, and or children. It's very important that you be upfront with your spouse. And by the way, if you're single, this doesn't apply to you at the moment, but I am addressing those people who have a significant other or a family. You want to be able to say, look, we're going to be transitioning out of the military here in the next 6 months or a year. Let's talk about where do we want to live? What kind of work might I do? If you're working, meaning the spouse is working, would we stay here? Would we move somewhere else? How would we ensure that we take care of having enough income for ourselves and or our kids? And just have the conversations. Talk to your spouse, talk to your children, especially if it's going to require a move. If the kids are in school, that's a traumatic event to then move again to wherever you might end up going. Or if you're going to stay. Remember, they're dealing with uncertainty as much as you are. So please talk to them. Now, what else can you do besides talking with your kids and talking with your spouse? Well, do things with your spouse, do things with your kids. Become much more involved in their lives than you otherwise would be. So the most important thing, in summary, is It's not just going to be a potential challenge for you to transition because you're going into something that you know and that it was your life for 4 or more years. But it also was the same for your spouse and for your children as well. And now you're going into a time of uncertainty. So it's very important that you talk to them, you ask them open-ended questions. What are you thinking? What would right look like for you? What are your concerns? What would you like to do? What would you like dad or mom to do or not do? And make sure, even though they may be young, include them in the discussions as well.